Hi everyone, can you hear me? Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Afrizal from Universitas Andalas, located in Padang, in West Sumatra. Uh, in this panel, we are going to discuss palm oil conflict and access to justice. The rapid expansion of palm oil plantations in Indonesia has led to widespread conflict with rural communities. These communities are losing land to palm oil companies and are often poorly compensated. In response, they protest through demonstrations, lobbying, litigation, blockades, land occupations, and occasionally violence. This session examines the causes, nature, and outcome of this conflict, focusing on why palm oil companies are successfully dispossess rural Indonesian and why communities use a rightless form of resistance based on social norms and tradition. In this panel, we are going to discover insights from esteemed panelists on rural Indonesian conflict with palm oil companies, including the role of rightlessness, local resistant character, and strategies for defending land rights. We also learn about an NGO support a community in the Deli Serdang district in North Sumatra. There are supposedly four speakers in this panel. One is Ward Berenschot from KLTLV Netherlands, and the second is me, Afrizal from Universitas Andalas, West Sumatra, and the third is Eka Vidya Putra from Universitas Negeri Padang in West Sumatra, and the fourth is Ibu Linda Elida from Universitas Sumatera Utara. We have plenty of time, and each speaker will have 10 minutes presentations. All speakers will present their paper first. Then after that we have Q&A section. War, please present your paper. Time is your word.
Hello, good morning, or there in Jakarta, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining this session, and thank you to the organizers for bringing Indonesian researchers and Dutch public and Indonesian public together. I'm happy with this opportunity. So I'm going to my presentation. I'll try to keep short because I'm very curious to hear your comments and questions also. And I'm going to talk about the causes, the root causes, if you like, of all these land conflicts. As Pa Afrizal just mentioned, land conflicts are very common across Indonesia, and people struggle to solve them. It has proven very difficult to find solutions for uh, the complaints, the problems that people have with companies coming in and often taking their land. So I want to discuss with you some results of our research. With Pa Afrizal and two others, we just published this book, Kampa Anhak, about the character of the struggles between companies and rural Indonesians. And so here are some short findings. And I'm going to start with briefly discussing a short case that this Saturday flared up again. If we can go to the next slide. This is the case of PT HMBP in Central Kalimantan. Already it became quite famous 2 years ago when these villages you see on the right hand picture were taken to court for harvesting palm oil bunches, fruits. They said this was their land, but the company said were their trees. And I guess both were right, because as already Komnas HAM and other institutions had found, the company had used land outside of the boundaries of the HGU. So they were planting their trees outside of their land on community land. But that did not stop the judge from sentencing these three villagers to jail. And as you can imagine, that did not help to solve the problem. But just last week, villagers started big protest again, and they blockaded the road, as a bit in the picture you see on the left, stopping the operation of the company, who then ordered or asked the police to step in. And the sad thing is that it seems that they have been shooting with real bullets, and two people were injured and one people was killed. It was just last Saturday. I'm telling you this story because it helps to frame our question. How is it possible that a company comes in, takes not only community land, but also violates regulations because it doesn't respect the boundaries of the HGU? It doesn't give a, compensation in the form of what's called plasma often. And still, it's very difficult for people to solve these problems and to get the company to pay compensation and to respect the concession boundaries. Now, for that, we have to go to the next slide. Because here we present the general overview of the outcomes of the cases that we studied. We studied 150 cases, and we found that in total, in most of the cases, that is the ones between the brackets in red here, 68%, there is basically no solution for the complaints that people have for the issues I mentioned, land being taken from them, violations of the company, and no plasma or other forms of compensation. So people basically tend to lose in these conflicts. So, and we found there are three reasons why this is so. Let's go to the next slide. Tolong next. And I'm going to discuss that on the basis of this research project I just mentioned, which we did in 4 provinces, in Riau, West Sumatra, West Kalimantan, and Central Kalimantan. And although Afrizal and I am presenting it, I want to emphasize that this is a collaboration between many also NGOs and local researchers who has made this research possible. Next. Next. I'll go a bit quick. So we found basically that it's so difficult for people to protect their rights and to solve these conflicts because of a situation what we are calling rightlessness. Not rightlessness on paper, but in reality, that it's very difficult for people to use legal protection of their interests. They have become and made ineffective. And to understand the situation of rightlessness, we have to first go back in history a little bit to this particular law, which was adopted in 1817 by the colonial rulers, that is the Dutch at that time. They adopted a law which was called the Agrarische Wet, or the Undang-Undang Agraria, which has this sentence here that I highlighted in red, which says all land that is not yet privately owned becomes domain of the state. This then became known as the domeinverklaring or domain declaration, because with this particular sentence, large tracts of the land, at that time about 75% of all Indonesian ground, became domain of the state, controlled by the state. And why is this relevant? Because this particular decision lives on. If we go to the next slide. Still, there has been attempts to reform this domain declaration, but the basic fact that the state controls a large part of Indonesian land is still in place. The wording has changed a little bit. For example, now this land is mostly talked about as kawasan hutan, even though it's mostly not hutan, but this refers to land where people cannot have certificate, cannot have land ownership. and with land that is controlled by the state. And this is still around 63% of all Indonesian landmass. And that means that these this creates this fertile soil for conflicts, because on the one hand, people that are living on the land for a long time cannot own the land and have legal protection of their ownership. But on the other hand, companies can get a concession from the government for starting, say, a plantation. So people feel this is our land, but companies can legally say this is we have a right to take your land because we have the concession. This is a source, as you can imagine, for conflict. Next slide. Um, and then another cause of the problem, which I cannot get into long, but is that there are legal protections of interest of people, including, for example, that companies should provide a plasma, meaning that people should get part of the profit from a plantation. And there are also other regulations that say, for example, that the state should recognize customary land rights. And if we go in the next slide, we see there's a whole range of other laws. You see that on the left side of the column. Next. So there are all these protections that protect the rights of common Indonesians, but at the same time, or not at the same time, later usually, new regulations have been adopted that undermine and that weaken these protections for people. And that is what we're calling the backdooring of the law. Many rights of citizens are being backdoored by lower level regulations, often implementation regulations, that make these protections weaker or ineffective. And that's a second source of rightlessness. Now we go to the third slide. Now the third, also very important source of rightlessness, but of a different kind, is our informal relationships between companies and local authorities. We found in our research that there are ongoing, very regular exchanges of favors, as exemplified in the case that I started with of PT HMBP, where the police agrees to come and break up a blockade and protect the company, but in return they get money. There's considerable funding going from companies to the police, not only to the institution of the police, but also sometimes donations, individual donations, which and the same thing happening with um, elected politicians like district heads that get campaign funding from companies, or even lower level authorities like chamat or district heads that have collusive relationship with companies. And the result of that, and that's very important, is that the state tends to not be partial or neutral, but tends to prioritize the interest of companies. And we traced the effect of that in four different phases of these conflicts. First, the way that companies get the license, then how companies manage to avoid or get around the need for companies to get informed consent. Like legally, the community should give consent before the companies take their land, but often this is circumvented. Also, these collusive relationships help to repress community protests. That's the case I just discussed of PTH-BP. And also, it weakens conflict resolution mechanisms. And Pa Afrizal might say more about this, that often local authorities are called upon to mediate the conflict, but because they are already beholden to companies, they do not effectively engage and try to solve these conflicts. So, and if we go to the next slide, I give you some examples. And this often seems to be a strategy of companies that they do and make active efforts to maintain these collusive relationships and use these relationships to get local leaders on their side, to suppress protests, but also often, as in the case of PTH and BP, to criminalize leaders of protests, to get the police to act against their violations. And that creates this situation that feels very unjust for villagers in the area, that we have a violation of the company who for years has a plantations outside the concession boundaries, The police does not do anything about that. But then you have villagers that harvest palm oil on their own land, and still they are arrested very quickly and sent to jail. So it seems for villagers that the police and the judicial system is not uh, um, treating everybody equally because of close relationship between company um, and company and authorities. I mean, you see here this picture, just a visual indication of this. Okay, next slide. I don't have time to go into how that collusive relationship, all the ways that it shows, but you can see it from various statistics of how companies often get away with various violations of having, for example, land inside forest areas where they're not allowed to have, or not having full licenses. Next slide. Um, or the way in which, as I mentioned, companies do not actually get the consent of people for getting their land, although they should, and there is rules that they should, but they manage to get around that. Next slide. And these many ways in which protests are repressed. Um, we found that PT HMBP is not an exception. In 42% of the 150 cases we studied, there's protest leaders are arrested and imprisoned. In total, this was 745 people that were arrested. And there's then also a lot of violence surrounding this. Please go to the next slide. And here just some random pictures of people and actual suffering of people ending up in hospitals. In our cases, we found 16 people dying because of this violence and police shooting. And since Saturday, we have to then add a 17th person to this list, sadly. Next. Yeah, so as I said, many arrests and violence that we documented. And I want to emphasize with the statistic that often the violence actually does not come from the community, that often actually stays relatively peaceful, but rather from the company and people, the police and other people hired by the company. You see that the difference here is 55 for 33. Next slide. And this leads to what that all creates is that conflict resolution mechanisms that are there are not effective because people leading, for example, this mediation, the village head, the Bupati or the Chamat, often is already beholden to the company, and although there's sometimes a deal, even if a deal is made, it's often not implemented. So that means, and then I go to the next slide, that very often the conflicts that we found, um, people end up saying to us during interviews, kami kemana lagi? Where can we go and take our grievances? We have a company that violates the law, that took our land. We don't get any compensation, but we don't know where to take our problem. And this is an indication of rightlessness, that there is the rights that people have on paper are very difficult to realize. So this is what in the book we call de facto rightlessness. De jure, meaning according to law, people are not rightless. They have various rights and regulations. But because of already the colonial past, I mentioned, this backdooring of these legal protections, and thirdly, because of the collusion between state authorities and companies, in practice, on the ground, the rights are very difficult to realize, and people end up feeling that that they are powerless in defending their interests, and that powerless is a basic characteristics of the conflicts that we studied. Thank you.
We will have a Q&A after the three of us present our paper. And next, I will present my paper. Could you show my slides, please? Okay, I'm going to talk with you the same as War about our recently published book entitled Kehampaan Ha. My part is the section of the book is about rightlessness character of local communities resistant to palm oil expansion in Indonesia. Next slide, please. So, as what mentioned, the book is about studies of large cases, 150 palm oil conflict in four provinces: Riau, West Sumatra, West Kalimantan, and Central Kalimantan. Next slide, please. Okay. A lot of people contributed to this book, to this research. There are people of four NGOs involved, local researchers and national NGO who support our research. It's really collaborative work. Next slide. So the main argument of the book concerning resistance of local people to palm oil expansion is this: people in four provinces adopt a strategy of protest focused on bargaining and financial compensation rather than laws and rights. So we call this in our book rightless resistance. Next slide. We define a rightless resistance as involving accommodative protest strategy geared toward building informal ties with power holders to strengthen the community bargaining position in ad hoc negotiations using a discourse that frames claims and grievances mostly in customary traditions and social norms rather than state laws and rights. Next slide. Communities in four provinces engage in many protests to struggle for their land rights. Of the 244 demonstrations, we could document 105 were before government buildings and 26 of them in front of district or provincial parliaments. Very rare they demonstrate in front of company office because their intention is to gain the intention of government officials. Next slide, please. Okay. So most demonstrations aim at getting local government to pressure companies to push companies on the table of negotiations. Next slide, please. Community leaders express grievances in terms of social norms, adat. They use adat terminology rather than laws. We provide for examples, need-based discourse. For example, kami akan berjuang sampai titik darah penghabisan karena lahan itulah periuk nasi kami untuk menghidupi keluarga. It is the discourse of local people, and the second one is saya beri waktu sampai Sabtu nanti untuk mencari solusi. Kalau tidak ada solusi, jalan itu diportal lagi. So this is the way they express the grievances, and the third one is norm-based discourse. Kami warga desa Karamuan sudah bosan dengan janji-janji perusahaan yang tidak pernah ditepati. So we call this norm-based discourse. Next slide, please. To resolve conflicts, communities in four provinces mostly rely on local government. You can see in this figure, 73% of cases use mediation and facilitation by local government. Only 25% use the court, 19% use bilateral negotiations directly with corporations, and only in 11% cases people go to RSPO, uh, international body of sustainable palm oil conflict, who has headquarters in Kuala Lumpur. Next slide. So I would like to repeat again what Bernard Scott have said earlier. This two source of rightlessness resistance. Again, cartel land right due to limited recognition of individual land ownership contribute to this rightlessness character of local people resistance, and the effect of domain clearing continues until now. This is reflected in the determination of forest area. So the forest area is set up without considering adat law, land right based on adat, and because of the establishment of forest area, people have to have legal recognition from the state, and as what mentioned, it is hardly possible for them to claim individual right on land considered or set up by the government as forest area. And the second, again, the big dooring of the law contribute. Even though there are regulations, open possibility for local people to claim land right on piece of land, but then the lower regulation direct the law to the disadvantage of local people. So these two sources causes rightlessness resistance of local people in four provinces we studied. Next slide. So thank you very much. That what I can share with you. And our book are now available at the market and library. You can read our book to have further understanding of what we have presented this afternoon. The next speaker will be Bu Linda Elida from Universitas Sumatera Utara. Bu Linda, take your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Afrizal, for my session. Okay, please. Okay, this is my title: Strategy of Local People to Defend Their Land Right, a case of village in Deli Serdang district. Actually, this my presentation is a part of our joint research with Pak Afrizal. But for this session, I focus on how local people using their capital to win the conflict. Okay, next. My my research for this to explain the conflict that I use Bourdieu. What is Bourdieu said that social practice Social practice, according to Bourdieu, is the result of dialectical dynamics between external internalization and internal externalization. The external pertains to objective structure outside the social actor. Meanwhile, the internal encompasses everything related to the social actor. Thus, what is observed and experienced outside the social actor dynamically moves dialectically with the expression of everything that has been internalized to become part of the social actor. In this study, social practice is focused on the performance of communities that implement the values of land ownership rights in the practice of resisting land confiscated by companies. According to Bardi, there are four capital: economy, culture, social, and symbolic capital. Next. Economic capital it includes financial assets such as money, property, and other valuables that can be used to gain profits, build relationships, or influence society. Next slide. Cultural capital includes a person's knowledge, skills, education, and intelligence. It can be used to influence an individual's life course, including social mobility, relationships, and opportunities in life. Next slide, please. Social capital. This refers to the network of social relationships, social norms, and interdependence between individuals or groups in society. Can be used to explain how social relationships influence a person's or group access to resources and benefits in society. Underlies the relationship and dependencies between individuals and groups in society and has a significant impact on well-being and social dynamics. Next. The other capital is social capital. No, social capital and symbolic capital. Okay, next. Field of conflict. Our research take place in Sumatra Utara province or North Sumatra province. This I did my research, our research in three sub-district, but two district. First, conflict between the landowners of Persil 4 and PTPN 2 in STM Hilir Subdistrict Deli Serdang. Conflict between Penara landowners and PTPN 2 in Tanjung Morawa, Deli Serdang, and conflict between community landowners and PT RMM Rimba Mujur Mahkota in Natal Subdistrict Mandailing Natal District. Next. From the research, we found that the grievance of local communities based on their location was the ownership of a land became from land concession, tanah suguhan, surat izin garap 1953, Penara also like this, and Natal Mendeling from community land. Their grievance, the land include in cultivation right or HGU of PTPN 2. But for the Natal, their grievance about plasma right. The duration take long times from in STM Hilir Deli Serdang from 1972 to the present. Penara Deli Serdang also from 1972 to the present, and Natal Mendeling from 1996 to 2018. Next. How they achieve from this conflict in system Hilir, they win in Supreme Court in 2004, but in current situation not executed yet, but the land occupied by the community. There are around 525 hectares of the land, and in Panara, they also win in Supreme Court, Mahkamah Agung in 2015, not executed yet, but occupied by PTP2. In Natal, they got their hak plasma, but only 1.3 from 2 hectares per family. And the problem is plasma location outside community lane village. Next. Then I will explain the strategy, how capital placement strategy they did for the winning the conflict. First, using social capital for mediation and dialogue, using strong networks and relationships with parties involved in the conflict to mediate and facilitate dialogue. Social capital can help in opening up communication and reaching better agreements. Then using cultural capital for education and awareness, leveraging cultural values, norms, and traditions to shape public opinion, build awareness, and support positive change regarding conflict. Education and counseling based on cultural values can help change perception and attitudes towards conflict. Using symbolic capital to influence public opinion, and then mobilizing social capital for collective action, uh, for national and international movement. Utilization of economic capital for influence and profit. Using economic wealth or resource to gain power and influence in an area of conflict. Economic capital can be used to support parties involved in a conflict, whether in terms of logistics, funding, or economic influence. And the last, integrating different types of capital for a holistic approach, combining different forms of capital, social, cultural, economic, and symbolic to create a more effective approach to dealing with conflict. This holistic approach harnesses the power of various types of capital to achieve the goal of comprehensive conflict resolution. This is my last presentation. Uh, I thank for this session, and then if have uh, any question, I bring back to Pak Prijal. Thank you.
Thank you, Bu Linda. Very interesting research and presentation. Now we open a session for Q&A. To our audience, please give your questions or your comments. Thank you.
And perhaps while we wait for comments and questions, which we're happy to take, just a thought on in response to Belinda's presentation. So what's interesting also about this case is that communities won a few court cases, which is relatively rare, but also that in 2 out of the 3 cases, if I'm not mistaken, it was not implemented, the decision of the Mahkamah Agung.
Yeah.
And this is something that Pa Afrizal and I also found in our research. We came across 40 court cases, of which 9 were kind of won by the community, until the Mahkamah Agung, they felt that the claim of the community was right. But then out of these 9, 7 of them were not implemented at the time of the research. So only 2 were implemented. And this shows, I think, and also Belinda's research, same, it shows that there's a big problem with implementing these court rulings. And this is another illustration why we feel that the word rightlessness is really fitting. Because if even the Mahkamah Agung says you have right, and even then it is not implemented, there is really a situation of rightlessness on the ground for people that it's just impossible to realize your rights if even a court ruling is not being implemented.
Yeah, I agree. What we found in other provinces, Bu Linda also find in North Sumatra. Isn't it what?
Yes, in this case, although perhaps the exception of this case that Belinda describes is that it seems communities are very good at bringing their cases to court, in that they won so many times, 3 times, which is quite special. And I would be interested I think the question to you, Belinda, you talked about capital and the capital in terms of Bourdieu, would you also say that these communities have strong cultural and social capital, and that's the reason why they manage to bring their cases to court so often and also be successful at it?
Okay. Can I answer, Pak Afrizal?
Yes, 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 please, Bu Linda.
Okay. Based on their explanation, especially from the leader of the community, they said that the capital, especially from the leader, first from financial, because they need money while they land take over or claim from PTP2. So they need money to support their activities, and then not only that, they also need like knowledge how to uh, how to uh, mengangkat apa ya, menyampaikan
To express.
to express their grievance, and in 1988 they went to one of Tromol post of 5,000 from vice president, Indonesian vice president, and the vice president uh, um, apa, support them to go to the court, and then they follow the instruction from the vice presidents, and they went to the from the law court, and then up to uh, Mahkamah Agung. But until now, they can occupy the land for STM Hilir. Almost 525 of the land now occupied by community, and they plant ubi kayu, cassava.
Cassava.
Yes. But and the local leader have a strong, nowadays they have strong money or economic, because the economic come from the cassava plantation. Now they have money to support apa ya, dia uh, want to win the conflict. But for the Penara, even they win, the PTP2 always against them. And 1 month ago, they went to Jakarta and demonstrate, push the government, especially Kementerian Hukum dan Perundang-undangan, to give to help them to uh, to me, m- eksekusi the land. That's
And is it likely that they will succeed to execute the land?
for Penara. I just called the leader. He said that many troubles because many actor, the other actor disturb the process and didn't give the support to occupy the land. But in STM Hilir, the local leader said kami siap berperang. They said like that. We want to fight. If you occupied, if PTP2 occupied our land, we have to fight. And there's no problem to them because they have money and they have local group, strong local group or community group. That's part one.
So, and I'm curious. Oh, sorry, Afisa.
it seems to me that people, villagers in North Sumatra, are more able to organize themselves against the company and to use the court. It's very interesting case. What? Please go ahead. What?
Yeah. And so in your cases, Linda, did you also find indication of this collusion that I talked about? That indications that the
Yes.
company is maintaining close relationship with local authorities and politicians? And what
Yes.
did that look like in your case?
Yes, there is a coalition not only from the government, local government, but also to the, they said mafia tanah.
Can you explain?
Okay, in Penara, they said they are facing like conglomerate, I think, yeah, from they want the land to occupied for housing from one big conglomerate in Indonesia in property. I don't know, in property. So the community know that the land, especially PTPN2 is not HGU is finished yet, not to tidak diperpanjang. So they know that land will be take place or will be occupied another company to build housing. And for STM Hilir, they also know that this is for urbanized location. So the land, they know that PTPN2 must be mengeluarkan the land from the HGU, and then they will sell the land to the mafia tanah or to company for building or for the house perluasan perkotaan. That's because the location not far from Medan, not far from airport, very close. So the city for the city need many land to membesarkan kota to
expand the city.
Yeah.
And
yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that makes the value of the land very high and difficult for villagers to hold on to it. I guess. Yeah.
But Pak Wat, I want for all of us help them because the community depend on the land, especially in STM Hilir, because now after the PTP2 take over their land from 1972 up to 2004, they live is disgrace and they go to property, and then after they win and they occupation the land, now they plant cassava, now they economic going
up again,
better, and then they want how to keep the right. That's Pak Wat.
And in these cases, could communities freely protest, or was there also some police harassment of protests, maybe violence, like in the case of BPH and BP that happened on Saturday?
At past, yes, but now they didn't worry any mereka tidak takut sama sekali.
Okay. What I find also somewhat shocking and worrying is that in these cases of violence, there's rarely, it seems to be, as far as we could document, rarely a real investigation and some punishment for people,
Yes.
for police officials using violence. In this case of Saturday, my contacts there in Kalimantan sent me this quite terrible video clippings from people just lying on the ground with clear bullet wounds, being shot clearly by the police, which is clearly uncalled for and illegal. But very rarely you would see then an investigation, I think, that whether there should be disciplinary punishments of the police. So that this is what making also the protest very dangerous for people, and in
Oh,
our view, voiding the right to protest because the police is willing to use violence against them.
Bu Linda, why do you think kejaksaan does not does not do execution, does not perform
execution.
execution? Why
Hmm.
do you think?
For around, I think 10 years ago, the BPN, Badan Pertanahan Nasional, agree, but then agreed to execute the land, but PTP 2, I don't know, they use their influence, they influence the BPN to not execution. I don't know what. And I think the power of the government make the execution not yet do. Pak
It's
Rizal.
very interesting. Where why the attorney does not execute the Supreme Court decision.
Yes,
So
when
people,
I read from your book, from Rightlessness book, I read that one of the reason why the court didn't execute because of they need the people or the community can prove the part of the location, so they need an expert. So the local people ask me, please find us to an expert to justify the fixed location of the land,
Hmm.
because the court asked them, do you know where is the fixed location? The court asked like that. That is the trouble to execute, because
What do you mean
they
with
don't know
fixed location?
fixed location about the
What
uh,
is that?
apa in map, the I think apa peta, misalnya titik koordinat, the coordinate, where is the fixed coordinate their land. So that is the one of the
And you mean
witness.
fixed? You mean fixed, but you mean like free
I-
land to make a plantation, to make plasma? Is that it?
Yes, the titik, the point of the point of the titik coordinate, the coordination of
the exact location of the
exact
land
location of the land by putting the
where the Supreme
coordinate.
Court decides as the right of. It's very funny. Why Supreme Court? I think the location of the land is in the map.
Ya,
Hmm.
hakimnya
In what?
bertanya,
So,
bisakah kamu buktikan itu tanah kamu? I think,
the
bisakah kamu
Supreme,
buktikan?
yeah, Supreme Court decides that the land belong to them. So
Yeah.
why lower why kejaksaan lokal ask them to
Even
To
the
use
create.
the land?
local show them the peta, the bata, the map, that is our land, but uh, the court asked them, give, you are not the expert They
Yeah.
say like
It
that.
seems actually more a case of also backdooring the
Backdooring.
decision of the court. Like the court has taken a decision, this is their land, and then the lower court finds a reason not to
Ah,
implement it.
yes, to implement
Like
on.
in his
Yes.
other examples, that often things get backdoored.
Yeah, or we can call it mencari-cari alasan.
Ya, mencari-cari
Mencari
alasan.
alasan. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Well, talking about mencari alasan, if there are people in the audience that want to state their question in bahasa Indonesia, right? In bahasa Indonesia,
Iya, iya.
silakan, tidak apa-apa.
Iya.
Juga.
Silakan kalau ingin bertanya dalam bahasa Indonesia juga, silakan. Karena Word juga sangat fasih berbahasa Indonesia.
Oke.
Mungkin lebih
Hawari,
enak.
sudah adakah pertanyaan Hawari atau gimana?
No question.
Eh,
Kalau
Asik.
saya bertanya boleh?
silakan,
Kawan.
silakan.
Ya.
Iya.
Kasus penara mereka sudah sampai putus asa terkadang, Pak Wan. Dan itu dihalang-halangi oleh menterinya sendiri, Menteri Pak Mahfud. Pak Mahfud MD, Menteri
Memang.
Koordinator.
Sampai situ sekarang ada kasusnya. Ya.
Apalagi tanah itu strategis untuk perluasan kota karena bagian dari airport, bagian dari bandara, bagian dari untuk perluasan kota. Medan itu kan terbatas, mau meluas tuh ke arah Tanjung Morawa, ke arah Deli Serdang.
So what I think we see in your case, and what we also found in the 150 cases we studied, is that the outcome of these conflicts are often not based on rules or regulations or formal mechanisms, but in the end, the outcome is more on who has better informal connections, who can pressurize, who, and in this case, it seems community could occupy the land at least. So there's no formal solution, but they managed to wiggle through and then claim the land at least. And this is what we find. Like in one of the main success cases we found in Senama Nenek case in Riau, people won and they got the land back, which was just 1 out of 18 that the people really got something. But they got the land back not because the judge said so, or because the procedure said so, or the law said so, but because they managed to meet with Jokowi and campaign during his presidential elections, and it's as like Balas Budi, Jokowi helped the community,
Yes.
which is good. But and also we found in our book, we conclude it's also a bit of a sad case because not everybody can go to the president and get his support. It's an indication that the formal mechanisms of solving conflicts are not working.
So I asked them, saya juga mengatakan to STM, to people in STM, to community that maybe they can inspiring from Senama Nenek that they got their land after they get transaction with politician. I think you must go to politician as your right to them. I think this is
using network capital rather than law. Law.
Indeed, social capital is more important here, and indeed, it often ends up with transactional politics rather than whether they have a right or not. Which, all of that is indication that more needs to be done. I find it. I would hope that in the coming presidential elections, the candidates would talk about this and would promise to implement more effective solutions, because this is a problem that affects the ribuan warga Indonesia. But so you would say it's a good thing to promise to voters, but so far I haven't heard much from the candidates.
So Pak Prijal, the other case of Natal, the company promised to give them 2 hectares, but they only got 1.3, and the location not in their land, in the district or in their in their village, but out of their village. I think this is akan mendatangkan masalah suatu saat. I think. But
So whose land is that?
another villagers.
So someday the villagers
Yeah,
of the
the
place
other
will again
yes,
this kind
the
of adu domba,
yes, that's a problem.
the
Adu
politic
domba.
of adu domba.
Okay.
Yeah. And Afriza, now that we're talking about cases, is there any update of the case in Sumatera Barat that was agak hangat 1 bulan yang lalu, the Air Tangis case?
Air bangis.
Very
Air
bangis, yeah,
Bangis?
yeah.
Any more
So
developments?
yeah, at the moment the situation is calm down. Local people keep cultivating the land, uh, but I'm not sure one day if Airbang is really set up by national government as a PSN location. So we know
Mhm.
from the Ministry of Investments, Pak Balil, the Airbang is not yet uh, established as program strategis nasional. It's not like Rempang in Batam.
Mhm. So in that
Yeah,
sense, there are no reasons to evict people.
yeah, no reason to evict people. So I'm not sure why the governor of Sumatera Barat, who are the PKS,
Yeah.
from PKS party, uh, back strongly the company. He said to the public that our bank is now is established by national government as a location of PSN, but he lied.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So he actually lied in that sense. That
Yeah,
it's
he lied in
he
that
said
side.
it is strategic and yeah. And
Hmm.
this is, I think, where the political economy
Yeah.
comes in, and where I think this is why that
Hmm.
it's an important factor why it's so difficult to solve these conflicts.
Yeah, yeah.
That
But,
likely the governor would stand to make money out of
hmm.
this particular land development, and this
Hmm.
gives him an interest to side with the
Hmm.
company.
The party like PKS also takluk
Mm,
takluk
Oh,
to investors.
yeah, yeah, the party. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are encouraged to have closing remarks.
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, could you do it? What?
Okay.
Mm,
Brief closing remarks for me then.
mm,
So I think in this session we've discussed the problem of conflicts between companies and rural Indonesians, and we discussed our book that has 150 cases, but we also discussed this interesting case from Bulinda in Sumatra. Um, and both cases show how ineffective, both our researchers I think show how ineffective conflict resolutions mechanisms are, and also that this problem is not just rooted in, it's not just one case or one issue, but these are structural problems behind it, including even a colonial heritage, but also a widespread collusive relationships between companies and local authorities. And from my sense, I think it shows that the need for the candidates in the presidential elections, in the upcoming elections, need to express commitment to do more to solve these conflicts. And in
okay.
that sense, that allows me in my closing remarks to take up the question from Peter van Tuyl in the remarks about whether the case of Rempang shows the importance of public pressure and advocacy to raise and solve these kind of conflicts.
Okay.
I think yes, and I think it's actually also I would add public pressure, advocacy, and maybe also research, that I think the only way that these land conflicts get a more structural solution is drawing more attention to them and making more
Yeah.
people aware that this is a big structural problem that does not have a solution right now. And by doing so, by getting it in newspapers, by getting it discussed in parliaments, and also by having books on it in, I hope, in the shops, we can create this pressure, and that hopefully at some point politicians and the president will promise to do something about it. And as a final comment, so Afrizal and I have been, in light of building public pressure, we have been working together with Watchdog, which is a documentary organization, to make a documentary on these land conflicts. Um, it will have even Pa Afrizal in it with his cat, but also we're visiting protests. There will be case PTH and BP will be there in the documentary also, and I hope the audience who hears this will go and watch the documentary, which hopefully will also help to raise more public pressure.
Yeah. So we hope everybody who listen to us will read our book Kampan Ha, and also watch film about us, about our research, and hopefully one day this country knows how to tackle land conflict, so that it benefit rural people in the future. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Ward. Thank you, Belinda. And
Thank you.
this is very insightful ideas we have this afternoon. And thank you very much. And see you again in other place. Thank you, Ward. Have a nice day.
Thank you all for organizing.
Okay. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Pak Wat. See you
Okay.
next
Bye.
time, Pak
Okay.
Prijal.
See you all
Okay.
next time.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.